All right. So we are going to talk about something today. It's one of those things that needs to be said periodically. And our preaching theme for this year is things that need to be said. So this is one of these things that need to be said, okay? And I want to tell you why I'm preaching this sermon today. It is because last Sunday, we had a young man that was here. And it was the very first time he's been here, maybe the only time he'll ever be here. And a few of you did shake his hand, talk to him, and that kind of thing. But I watched for about 10 minutes after he got here, and he was sitting all alone with no contact from anybody. So guess what we're going to talk about today? Hospitality. We're going to talk about hospitality. That's one of the things that it takes to build a church. Hospitality. That's one of the keys to building the church. You see, if people bother to come, now this guy was a little unique, but if people bother to come here, and when they get here, if they don't feel warmly welcomed and included and all of that kind of thing, then what happens is they're probably not going to come back. And then we have lost the opportunity to continue to interact with them long enough to help them understand how much God loves them, that Jesus came to save them, and help get them connected to the church. And so I just want to talk about this today. I don't mean this to be scolding you, because I have to tell you that our church does way, way better than the average at making people feel welcomed and comfortable and included and all that stuff. But every once in a while, we just need a shot in the arm to kind of get us revved up at doing that. And not to forget how important that is. This lesson is based on 1 Peter chapter 4, the first part of verse number 9. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse number 9. Evidently, in the first century, people also needed to be reminded of the importance of hospitality, because notice what Peter wrote here. He wrote, "Offer hospitality to one another." He had to tell them to do that. He had to bring that up to these churches. And Peter was writing to Jews who had been driven out of Jerusalem, and they had been scattered all throughout the known world of that day. And they were Christian Jews because of their faith. They'd been driven out of their homelands. And so Peter wrote this letter to them, and these churches had scattered out and sprung up all over the known world of that day. And so Peter had to tell them, had to remind them the importance of not becoming inward focused. You know what happens to some churches? And I don't think our church does this, but you know what happens to some churches? If you take a survey of the people in that church and you ask them, is your church a friendly church? You know what they'll say? Oh, absolutely. Our church is a very friendly church. But what they mean is, and they don't realize it, we're friendly to each other. We get to church and we kind of huddle in a group and we talk about what's going on last week and we'll talk to one another and all that stuff. But when somebody from the outside comes in, if we're not really, really careful, we'll be so busy being friendly to each other, we will neglect them. And that, my friend, is not hospitality. And so we got to be careful about that. We got to be always keeping our focus on people from the outside coming in so that we can do everything we can to bring them to Jesus. And so one of the things that we do in that process is to offer hospitality to one another. And that's what Peter told them to do. Now, a common Greek word in your New Testament, it was written in Greek and it's translated into English. And a common Greek word translated hospitality is philoxenos. And that really means nothing to us, except we need to understand that that's a compound word composed of two Greek words. The first one, philos, means friend, and xenos means a stranger. So literally, the word means to treat strangers as if they were your friends. You get that? You treat strangers as if they were your friends. And that means to us, in the context of our local church, that if somebody comes in and they're a stranger to you, you treat them as if they were your best friend. You go to them and you talk to them and you greet them and you just converse with them, maybe offer to sit with them. Just be sure that they are treated as friends. It is said by some of President Ronald Reagan's, our late president, some of his closest associates, that the secret to his immense popularity, and he was one of the most popular presidents since Abraham Lincoln, and the secret to his immense popularity was his ability to make people feel like they were his best friend the first time he ever met them. He was a master at hospitality. And Peter urged first century Jewish churches to learn to do what President Reagan had learned to do, to offer hospitality. And that's what he said, offer hospitality to one another. I'm convinced that Peter wrote this because offering hospitality is one of the best ways churches can make a good first impression on people. You get that? And you know how many chances we get to make a good first impression? One. If you blow it on the front end, you never have a chance to make another good first impression. You might can redeem that, and you might can try to make that better. But I'm telling you, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. So we really need to be on our toes about making people feel warm and welcome and included here at the Open Door Church. So let's talk about the importance of these first impressions, okay? Let's talk about the importance of first impressions today. Today, the Spirit of God will prompt hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. and millions around the world to visit a church for the very first time. The very first time. And there will be some of those people that have never been to church before. You say, yeah, but not in America. Oh, yeah. In America, we've had people come here that when they came here, it was the very first time they had ever been in church. So, Casey, can I embarrass you? I've already done it, right? I was going to do it anyway, right? So here's the deal. Casey came to church for the first time 2 weeks ago. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, and she told me in the aftermath of that it's the first time she had ever been in a church service. That's true? And you were born in America. Well, foreign country, Michigan, but that's still America, okay? So, but it's the first time she'd ever been in church when she came here. I could name you probably half a dozen, maybe more, others, that the first time they ever was in a church service was when they came here. And so God does that. God brings people to a church for the first time, and some of those people have never been in a church service before. How crucial is it that we get a good first impression the very first time? Let alone the very first time at a particular church. And you know what? Next Sunday, God's going to do it all over again. And the next Sunday, God's going to do it all over again. God is consistently attempting to build His church by giving us first-time guests, people that have never been here before. And when God sends somebody new through those doors, God is saying to us, here's an opportunity for you to cooperate with me as I build my church. That's at least part of what Jesus was talking about when He said in Matthew chapter 16, verse number 18, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Every week, God is attempting to build His church. The question is not, is God building His church? The question is, are we cooperating with Him by being hospitable to people when He's attempting to build His church? You get that? So we got to learn to do that, and we've got to continue doing what we've already learned to do. And so we got to get that. We got to get that important question down. What are we doing to cooperate with Jesus as He attempts to build His church? And the answer to that question is easily determined. If we really want to know how well we're doing or what we're doing to cooperate with Him as He builds His church, all we have to do is look at what I call our church's first impressions ministry. You know, we should have a ministry, a strategic plan, a strategic pattern of service that says we want to make a good first impression on these people who come here. Because we only got one chance to do that. And whether or not they come back is going to be determined largely by what kind of impression did they get the first time they came here. You ever been into a church? You ever been in a church and had a bad first impression? You ever got a bad first impression? Miss Jenny and I had the privilege of serving as missionaries to the Philippines for 4 years, and so in the process of raising money to be able to do that and then keeping churches informed when we came home on furlough, we went to hundreds of churches all over the Midwest in the United States, literally hundreds of churches. Every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, we were in a different church somewhere for an extended period of time. And then when we would come home, we get to come home for a couple of months, we were doing the same thing again. We went to hundreds of churches. Can I tell you our worst experience? Talk about what you don't want to be as a church. We went to this church. I'm not going to tell you where it was because some of you might be from there and you might know what church I'm talking about. But we went to this church It was on a Sunday evening, I think. It might have been a Wednesday evening, but I think it was a Sunday evening. And we went in, and first of all, we were the first ones there. Somebody had come open the door and left. And so we were the first ones there. And so we went into an empty church building. That's not the best hospitality, is it? And they were expecting us. I mean, we had been invited to go there. So how many of you invite people to come to your house, leave the door open, and then leave? Now, I have an uncle who threatens to do that when people are coming, but we don't that's not good hospitality, is it? And so we got there, and we were the only ones in the building. And so we were standing out in the foyer kind of waiting, and it was a church building that had the front doors of the building weren't on the front. The foyer was on the front, but on this side there was an entrance, and on the other side there was an entrance. And then to go into the auditorium, on this side there was a set of double doors, and on this side there was a set of double doors. Well, we didn't know where to go. So we went in, and we were kind of over to one side, waiting. And these people came in from the other side, and they saw us there. And you know what they did? They went on into the sanctuary. They didn't even say, "Who are you? What are you doing? Are you supposed to be here? Can I help you? Get lost?" I mean, they didn't say anything. They just went in. And then other people came in, and not one soul spoke to us. There were probably 20, 25 people that night, which is a clue. And it was 25 people or so that came in and went directly into the auditorium and never said a word to us. And finally, this old deacon came. And he came in and he "I guess you're the missionaries." I said, "Yes, sir, we are." He said, "Well, I tell you one thing. If you think you're going to get any money out of this crowd, you got another thing coming." Talk about hospitality. You understand what I'm saying? You don't want to do that. That is the exact opposite of what Peter told us to do when he said, offer hospitality. And we left that church service that night, and when we left and we were on our way, we were in the city and my uncle lived there, and we were on our way back to his place, and we looked at each other and said, that church died months ago and nobody's told them yet. Do you get that? I mean, there was absolutely no hospitality at all. No wonder there were so few people there in a city that has well in excess of 1 million people in it. And so anyway, God's going to do that. God's going to teach us to be hospitable if we will listen, and God will use our hospitality to build his church. Now, a church's first impressions ministry consists of everything we do to make such a powerful first impression on our guests that they will want to continue to come back long enough to understand the love of God, to receive the gift of eternal life, and get connected to the church. But whether or not that happens depends largely on what kind of first impression we make. The key to an effective first impressions ministry is offering genuine hospitality. Just loving people and treating them like they're your best friends when you don't know anything about them. You say, but he looks like a crook. Look around. It doesn't matter what he looks like, does it? We're supposed to offer hospitality. We're supposed to love people like Jesus did. And so we got to get that. That's why Peter wrote those first century Jewish churches and challenged them with that statement, offer hospitality to one another. In the context of a local church, hospitality is doing whatever it takes to make our guests feel welcome and want to come back again. And if we do hospitality well, first-time guests will leave the parking lot saying to themselves, wow, I think I'll come back here again. We want them to leave with a wow moment. Do you get that? We want to leave saying, wow, I've never been treated like that before. We don't want them to say, wow, I've never been treated like that. We want them to be excited about that. And so remember that we only get one chance to make that good first impression. So I want to give you a few practical hospitality tips. Can we do that? And we're gonna kind of organize to get this together in the weeks that are ahead. But I want to give you some practical hospitality tips. Number one, hospitality doesn't just happen. You aware of that? It doesn't just happen. It's something that we do. It's not something that happens to us. It's something that we do. So let's talk about a few practical things that we can do at our church to offer hospitality to one another. After all, it's sinful. I want you to get this. It's sinful to know we should do something like offer hospitality and then not do it. If we know we ought to do it and then for whatever reason we neglect it and just don't do it, that's sinful. James wrote this in James 4:17. Remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. In the King James Bible, it says, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. And so, if we know we should offer hospitality and then we just get neglectful or lazy or whatever and we don't do it, then that's sin. So let's talk about hospitality. Let's talk about hospitality before our worship service even begins. Before it ever begins. Hospitality begins with strategically preparing for our guests before they arrive. Now, put hospitality on the practical level of your home. At home, when you're expecting guests, do you wait until they get there to prepare for them? No. If you're expecting them, and we should be expecting guests at church every week, because God's going to be trying to bring them in. And so if we get these guests and we know that they're going to be coming, then we ought to be preparing in advance for them to come. We don't wait until they get here to start preparing. You know what you do at home? You clean your house. Admit it. You clean up when you're expecting company more than you clean up when you're not expecting company. Isn't that true? Yeah. Praise God, we got an honest crowd today. You clean the house. If you've got kids, especially little kids, maybe teenagers, you give your kids a pep talk about their behavior before the guests arrive. And that's what I'm doing. Kids, I'm giving you a pep talk about behavior here before the guests arrive. And then what? Then you decide how you're going to entertain your guests before they ever get there. How are you going to treat them? What are you going to do for them before they ever get there? You don't wait till they get there unless they're unexpected. You don't wait till they get there. And so we should view our church as a family expecting guests. And then hospitality should begin by strategically preparing for those guests before they ever arrive. And I want to suggest to you a few practical things that we can do before guests arrive. And we do some of this, but there's some of this that we've kind of neglected and we need to do it. And maybe some of it's new that we're not even doing. Number one, before our guests arrive, we need to be sure that both the exterior and the interior of the buildings have the best possible appearance. You know why? Because the appearance of our buildings is speaking to our guests long before any of us have the opportunity to say anything to them. You get that? If things are kind of neglected and not well maintained and all that stuff, and people pull in the parking lot and they see that, guess what? You know what that's saying to them? These folks aren't really all that excited about their church. They don't really care that much about their church. Look at this and look at that. I mean, all that's being said to them subconsciously before we ever get to tell them anything. Statistics reveal that most people decide whether they are coming back again to a church within the first 7 minutes after they drive onto the property. In the first 7 minutes, they've already made up their mind if they're coming back again. That's before the first song is sung or the first word of the sermon is ever spoken. You get that? I don't care how good your praise team is. If people don't feel made welcome before the service starts, the praise team ain't going to be able to undo that. And we have a great praise team, but they're not going to be able to undo that. And if people aren't made feel welcome before the service begins, it doesn't matter how good the preacher preaches, or in your case, how bad the preacher preaches, it doesn't make any difference. It can't undo that. And so we got to get that. We got to understand that. We need to make preparation before they ever get here. And then here's another thing. This is practical. Leave the best parking spaces, the ones closest to the entrance, for our guests. Isn't that just good hospitality? Just leave the best parking spaces for our guests. Now, if you're handicapped, if you have mobility issues, you need to park close, and we understand that. But the rest of you who are able-bodied, don't park right up at the front. Leave some spaces like that for guests. I really believe that's true. Guess where I park? You can go check it out. You know where I park? I park out by the dumpster. You know why? because I don't want our guests to have to park out by the dumpster. That's hospitality. Do you get that? Eventually, we'll add on to this building. And when we do, there'll be an entrance in the front and an entrance in the back, and we need to have places for our guests to park there. And that's just hospitality. And then here's another one. We need to have greeters, and we've got them. Miss Patty Scott had to work today, but we got greeters at the front entrance, and those greeters should welcome everyone, especially our guests, with a warm smile, and then provide any information they need. If there's something they need to know, we need to let them know that. For example, we could say when we give them a bulletin, inside your bulletin is a welcome card. Please fill it out and drop it in the offering plate at the end of the service so we can send you a thank you card next week. We're so glad you're here. You get that? But if we don't tell them that, they don't know that. You know? And so we got to do that. We got to just be hospitable. And then we don't do that very well. Some of you just do this voluntarily, and I'm grateful for you. But we need additional greeters inside here. You know, they get greeted out there in the foyer. We need people greeting in here, and so that we are certain that we got people in here doing what I call working the crowd. You know what I mean by working the crowd, right? You know, hello to people, shake their hands, kiss the babies, you know, all that kind of stuff. Just greet people in once they get in here. We don't want the only people that greet them to be one or two people out there. We want them to be greeted in here, because you know what statistics also reveals? For people to have a meaningful experience in a group setting, they have to have at least seven meaningful touches while they're there. Now, by a meaningful touch, I don't mean this physically touching, but I mean interaction. 7 meaningful interactions where somebody says something positive to them that makes them feel good about being in that group. Take 7 of those to make them feel really included. So it needs to start when they come in the door. It needs to continue while they're in here before the service starts. There need to be people working the crowd, just telling people how glad they are that they're here today. And it needs to be people other than me. And I need to do it too, because I need to set an example, and I try to do that, but it needs to be people other than me, because when they found out I'm the pastor, guess what they think? Well, that's his job. That's what they think. And so it's not nearly as meaningful. But if 4 or 5 other people do that, and it's not their job, then what do they think? These folks really care about me. They're really glad I'm here. And so that's part of the hospitality process. And so they need to have these additional touches. And then the greeters in the worship center, the ones that are inside here, should also make our guests aware that we have free snacks that are available at the Connection Cafe. You might even offer to bring them a cup of coffee and a snack. Either take them over there, or if they're a little reluctant, because you know our church is a little weird. Not every church has snacks, right? And some people even think it's wrong to have snacks, and that's okay. We don't want to argue about that this morning. We'll argue about that another time. But, offer to bring them something. If somebody comes into your house and you're going to show them hospitality, do you sit in the living room and say, oh, there's coffee and cake out in the kitchen. Help yourself. Is that what you do? And then you yell in, the plates are in the cupboard off to the left of the sink. Is that what you do? No, thank you, dear. No, that's not what you do. You go get it for them, offer to bring it to them if they'll take some of that. And so that's just hospitality. Don't let any first-time guests sit alone. Don't let them sit alone. If they're sitting alone, either sit with them or ask them to sit with you. Get that? Just go sit with them or ask them to sit with you. Just don't let them sit alone. Have you ever felt alone in a crowd? That's really an uncomfortable feeling, isn't it? So we don't need to do that. We need to make sure that we either sit with them or we invite them to come and sit with us. And then if a new family, I want to give you this one. If a new family is having trouble finding a seat, now they wouldn't today, but on many Sundays here, new families would have trouble finding a seat, right? Because the building is kind of full. That's a great blessing. But if a new family is having trouble finding enough seats together, then those of you who consider the Open Door Church your church home and you're part of the family here, you need to get up and offer them your seats. You say, but this is my seat. Excuse me. No, it isn't your seat. It's Jesus' seat. And if you get to use it, then you need to be grateful. But if somebody else needs it so you can offer hospitality, get up and offer them your seat. That's just hospitality, isn't it? That's just what we do if we want to show hospitality to others. Now, I want to say this too. When the building is really full, and new people come in, where do they want to sit? Where? In the back. You girls got it. In the back, right? They want to sit in the back, okay? So if the building starts filling up, and those of you who generally sit in the back, it's okay. But if all the seats are full, except this front row is almost always empty, these chairs will never wear out. They're not gonna, if they have to walk all the way to the front and sit up here, guess when they're coming back? Never. So I'm saying, those of you who are comfortable, those of you who know that I'm going to probably point you out if you're out on the front and use you as an illustration in the sermon and you're cool with that, come on to the front. And you understand what I'm saying? Make your guests as comfortable as they can possibly be. That's hospitality. Now let's talk about after the service. You see, hospitality shouldn't stop when the service starts. Even during the service. Okay? Even during the service. So we got a new family comes in, and during the service they have a little one, and we've told them where the nursery is, but they're a little uncomfortable about, how all that works, and so they got a little one, and the little one is just going nuts. I know that never happens to you, but if that happens to some unfortunate family, and you can tell they're embarrassed by that, you know what hospitality says? Some lady gets up and goes to them and says, could we be helpful? Can I take your baby to the nursery for you? Or can I go with you to the nursery and help you? Not in a way that says, your kid is a brat, get him out of here. Not that. But in a way that says, can I help you with this? How many of you have been in that situation and you would have been so relieved if somebody had just told you what to do? Something that's the thing. We just need to do that kind of thing. And so, that's during the service. But then after the service, when the worship service is dismissed, and then we should continue to offer hospitality by intentionally wowing our guests with such a powerful invitation to come back again that they simply can't resist. I mean, if somebody comes here and we do all the stuff right at the beginning of the service, and then they leave, and as they leave, we're so busy being friendly with one another, nobody says to them, we really are glad you were here and we want you to come back next week. They're going to leave thinking they don't want me to come back next week. Nobody invited me to come back next week. Do you see what I'm saying? We need to be sure that they get that invitation to come back again. And so I want to give you a few suggestions of some things that we can do to wow our guests with an invitation to come back the following Sunday. First of all, those greeters in the worship center, they should work the crowd at the close of the service and be certain that everyone, but especially our guests, are told, I'm glad you came to the Open Door Church today. And you can admit that we're weird, that we're different, that we're dysfunctional. You can admit all that. But we love Jesus, and we love you. And we would really like for you to come back next Sunday. Hope you had a good time. Want you to come back again next Sunday. And then we should continue to offer hospitality after the service by having people stationed in the foyer to give everyone every first-time guest a gift. And we usually do this, a daily bread book. One of the little daily breads. Give them something and say, hey man, we're so glad you came. We hope this can be a blessing to you. Come back again next week. Isn't it just good hospitality to offer people something when they leave? That's just going above and beyond what would normally happen, and we can do that. Every first-time guest who provides an email address on their welcome card should receive an email. We live in the techno age, don't we? If they put an email address on their card, do you know what they're telling us? I'm young enough, technical enough, that I use email. Right? And they communicate electronically. And so we need to take advantage of that to do our hospitality ministry. If they do that, if they put an email address on their card, then it should be somebody's responsibility in our hospitality ministry, our first impressions ministry, to make sure that on Monday they get an email thanking them for coming to the Open Door Church and again asking them to come back the following Sunday. Don't forget about them once Sunday's passed. Send them an email on Monday and say, hey, man, we're glad you were here. Glad I got to meet you. Come back again next Sunday. And then every first-time guest who provides a cell phone number, and you are really in the dark ages if you don't have a cell phone, isn't that true? Now, you might not have minutes on your cell phone, but most people have a cell phone in this day and time, right? People that don't have anything else have a cell phone. Isn't that true? Now, some of you are looking like you're frowning because you're not in a position where you can have a cell phone. And we know that, and we love you, and we feel sorry for you. But you'll have one day. And so if you got a first-time guest and they provide a cell phone number on their welcome card, then they should receive a text message from someone from this church on Tuesday. Just think about that. They got all these invitations to come back on Sunday. They get an invitation to come back on Monday. They get an invitation from another electronic venue on Tuesday, and that message that they get ought to say, man, I'm so glad that you came to the Open Door Church. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Come back again. And then, now we're getting to my generation kind of stuff. Every first-time guest who provides a postal address, a snail mail address on their welcome card, should receive a handwritten card from someone from this church. Miss Brenda does that for us. Let's hear it from Miss Brenda. If you come for the first time, you'll get a card from Miss Brenda if you'll give us your address. And so they should get that, and they should get that maybe by Thursday. Because then they got something on Sunday, they got something on Monday, they got something on Tuesday. We let them rest on Wednesday. Then they get something on Thursday saying, we want you to come back again. And that card should thank them for attending the church and then ask them to come back the following Sunday. And we do this. This card should either contain a small gift or at least instructions on how to receive a gift when they come back the following Sunday. And we do that depending on who they are. If they live here close, we include a gift card in there. Miss Brenda does this. We include this gift card in there that says if you bring this back next Sunday, you'll get a gift. Because that's kind of motivation to get them to come back again. Now, if it's a situation where they can't have a gift, because they're in some kind of setting where they really don't need a material gift, then we put in there a gift card to a restaurant like Burger King. A $5 gift card, and they can go eat a burger on us and hope you come back again next Sunday. Do you get that? I mean, all of that is just hospitality. All that is just ways to let people know that we really, really care about them. And somebody says, they might come back just to get the gift. Praise God. At least they're coming back and we get to tell them the Jesus story again. Do you get that? I mean, at least we're making an attempt to do what we're supposed to do for Jesus. Now, here's the conclusion. If we faithfully offer hospitality to our guests, God will honor us with more guests. You realize that? Approximately 47 weeks out of the year, the Open Door Church has first-time guests. That is incredible. It's incredible. There may be 5 or 6 weeks out of a year that nobody's here for the first time. We have first-time guests today. Let's let them know we're glad they're here. Amen? And so, you know, if we're faithful to offer hospitality to our guests, God will give us more guests. Here's how I know that. Near the end of his ministry, Jesus told a story. And in this story, this is what he said. It's in Matthew 25:21. He had given these guys some of his stuff and told them to faithfully invest it. And some of them did and some of them didn't. But when he come back, those who were faithful to do what he wanted them to do, guess what he said to them? He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. Now, in the context of hospitality in a local church, he's saying, I sent you a few guests. See if I could trust you with them. I sent you a few guests, and you were faithful to offer them hospitality. You cooperated with me as I was trying to build my church. And so since you were faithful, he says, what will I do? I will put you in charge of many things. In the context of the church and its hospitality, what's he saying? I send you a few guests, and you treat them hospitably and really work at getting them connected to me and connected to the church. Then what will I do? I give you more. I'll give you more. But the opposite of that is also true, isn't it? You get guests in, and you neglect them, and you don't prepare to be hospitable, and you're not hospitable, not that you're bad people or that you just don't realize you need to do this, and so you're not hospitable, and then God looks at that and says, I don't know if I can afford to send them anymore. You get that? I'm trying to build my church here, and if they're not going to cooperate with me, I might need to send them to the church down the road. You get that? So it's important that we do that. He said it right there in those verses in Matthew 25:21. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. That's just a reminder. Something that's kind of simple, but that we really need to work at. And then somebody will say, yeah, preacher, you're right, man. The church needs to do that. You are the church. If the church needs to do it, that means you need to do it, or it won't get done.